Some days as I report and analyze the news, I wonder why all the normal people in the world are ruled by men and women who are absolutely mad. I think about the comic strip here in the USA, Dilbert, and Dogbert, the talking dog, said, reality is always controlled by the people who are most insane. Well, one man that I admire very much for his defense of common sense in the face of government insanity is Nigel Farage. He's one of the founders and the leader of the United Kingdom Independence Party. Nigel also represents Great Britain as an elected member of the European Parliament. His defense of liberty and freedom and common sense has gained him admirers around the world. Nigel's on the phone from Great Britain. Nigel, good to have you back.
Thank you very much indeed.
Nigel, how do you keep your sanity as you deal with these people?
It's quite difficult. I mean, just 2 weeks ago we had Mario Monti, who is the new puppet Prime Minister of Italy, and he came to the European Parliament and he gave a speech about the euro, and he said everything's fine, chaps, nothing to worry about at all, and they gave him a standing ovation. I mean, I just find it difficult at times to keep on the level when we're applauding puppet prime ministers of nations like Italy. So it is quite difficult sometimes. But you've just got to understand that democracy and liberty are being traduced right across the Western world, all in the name of solving a crisis that many of us thought was avoidable in the first place.
It's like talking to a room full of mad hatters. I mean, look at what they've done to Greece. This is the birthplace of democracy, but there is no democracy in Greece anymore.
No, you're right. It is the cradle of democracy, and I've spoken on this issue time and again in the European Parliament, warning the Parliament that Greece is not like a failing subsidiary company where head office has to come in and sort everything out. Greece is still a proud nation of people. And to remove any ability through the ballot box to affect their destiny, to force upon them austerity measures, and please, your listeners must understand, youth unemployment in Greece is now over 50%. I mean, this is really, really serious. And my fear all the way through this has been that by doing what we're doing, we are going to spark a revolution.
I'm starting to think we're going to see a global revolution.
Well, I just don't know. I mean, you're quite right to put your finger on the point that there is enormous anger everywhere at the sheer impotence that electors feel because these decisions have been taken, beyond their own fingertips and handed over to supranational organizations. But we saw an Arab Spring last year with people on the streets and regimes falling in Egypt and Libya, and of course the scenes in Syria are playing out. Please do not discount this happening in the Mediterranean and actually within European countries, because it could.
Last week I read that the Greek constitution is being amended to allow the bankers to legally steal the gold in the central bank vault.
It is extraordinary that one of the demands of the recent so-called bailout package is the Greeks have to amend their constitution, which says their primary objective is to pay off foreign banks before they look after their own old age pensioners. It is incredible to me that the Greek political class are actually putting up with this, but they're all a bit like rabbits staring into the headlight of an oncoming car. They just don't know what to do, and the Greek political class haven't got the courage to stand up and say to the European Union, and let's not forget the villains of the International Monetary Fund in Washington as well, and to say, to hell with all of this. We're going to go back to the drachma. We're going to devalue. We're going to get our democracy back. At the moment, they haven't got the courage to do it, and so it's left to people to protest. And let's remember, just 3 weeks ago, when the Parliament was voting in Greece on this package, there were 80,000 people outside the Greek Parliament who had to be kept out of the building by 5,000 police because they were literally storming the barricades. That's how angry and how desperate these people are.
The news media in America was very careful to make sure that there were few visual images of the rioting seen on American television. It is very obvious, Nigel, that here in the States, the media is doing damage control They do not want the American people to see what is taking place in other countries. What are you hearing about actions being taken by the wealthy and the business owners of Greece to protect themselves?
Well, they're getting their money out. And if you look at the money held on deposit in Greece, it fell by over 20% last year. And if I look in London, at the fashionable bits of London, what we see are very wealthy Greek citizens getting their money out and buying real estate in London. So, no, the smart money says that however much we try to pretend that Greece can stay in the euro, ultimately, whatever happens, the country is going to go bust. And you know, capital flight, I'm afraid, is one of the biggest fears that I have.
And are people arming themselves?
Well, I had a conversation just 2 weeks ago here with a retired Greek ambassador, a man of some substance, a man who had held very senior positions in Greece, and he said, my friends who live in the big detached houses on the outskirts of Athens are all buying Kalashnikovs. You can buy them for €100 on the black market, and they're buying them because they feel the time is very close when they're going to have to defend their families and their property. Things are really, really bad in Greece.
What do you make of this decision by Germany to send 160 tax collectors to Athens? I mean, this to me sounds like the mafia sending in the goons to collect the money.
Well, I think it's worse than that. I mean, remember that your country and my country have not been occupied countries by foreign powers. But you've got to remember, and okay, you can argue that it's 70 years ago, but 70 years ago, when the Nazis were in control of Greece, they ruled that country under an absolutely brutal regime with appointees from Berlin who were there running the country. And frankly, what are ordinary Greek people who are unemployed, who are struggling to feed their children? And I'm not exaggerating here. Things are serious. What are they to think about foreign tax collectors being put into their country and taking over control? We have a recipe here for a really unpleasant, a really horrible, toxic cocktail of hatreds and possibly even political extremism. It is a grave, grave error to send foreign tax collectors into a country in a mess like Greece.
Well, it gets even worse because this morning Prime Minister Jean-Claude Juncker of Luxembourg called for a reconstruction commissioner, a commissar, to rule over Greece.
Well, if one was being really impolite, one would say a Gauleiter. because they were the people that were sent to take over German colonies. I mean, can't the Germans see? Can't they see that they've spent 60 years rebuilding their global reputation to a point where they become a country that we respected and liked, and they're losing it all in the way they're treating countries like Greece?
Nigel, with foreign tax collectors being sent in, with calls for reconstruction commissars to rule another country, to me this is a troubling sign for any nation that is deeply in debt. Your country, Great Britain, has a huge national deficit. America is in debt trillions of dollars. Should all of us take this as a warning of what could happen down the road with any nation?
I think that's possible, but I think people can live with poverty, and they can live with difficulty, provided they've got dignity. And I think at the moment your country and mine have a degree of dignity. But I think what is so awful in Greece is that you've got the foreign tax collectors that you've talked about, you've got the representatives of the IMF, the European Central Bank and the European Commission who come in. They've got a Prime Minister who was removed because he dared to say, let's have a referendum on whether we stay in the Euro. He's been replaced by a puppet Prime Minister who was a former senior official at the European Central Bank, and before that was the governor of the Greek Central Bank. And what is happening to Greece is, it isn't just the economics that are hard, it's their pride and dignity that is being stripped from them. And I think when you get to that point, then I think the chances of violence become very high indeed.
But is this going to become the norm? for nations that are in debt. I mean, are we going to see someday the central bankers of the world install the Prime Minister of Great Britain? They're going to install a future President of the United States? Is this where we're going?
Well, if I'd been on this show with you a year ago, and I'd said that when I come back in a year and we talk, there'll be a puppet Prime Minister in Greece, and even in a country of the scale of Italy, nobody listening would have believed it. But it's happened. It's happened with barely a murmur and barely a protest. So I would say that a very, very bad and very dangerous precedent has been set, and frankly, anything now is possible.
Hey, I don't know if you heard this today, but Ireland's Prime Minister Kenny said that Irish citizens should be given the opportunity to vote in a referendum on the new EU treaty. That's bad.
I know, I've just seen that. In the last half an hour or so. So don't be surprised if they try and remove him from office. It wouldn't surprise me at all.
Well, that was my first thought. This guy's political career is over.
Yes, I think that's right. I think that's absolutely right. And yeah, we may be very, very close to seeing the same process taking place in Ireland too.
Is Greece going to default on March 20th?
If you put me up against a wall, I would probably say that for now they'll just about be able to hold it, and they will make sure that Greece just about has enough money not to default on March the 20th. But let's not forget they've defaulted already, because as you mentioned in your introduction to me, there's already been massive, huge percentage write-downs on their private debt. Greece is being fed enough money to meet some of its obligations. But look, let's just face the truth. Greece is bust, and that's the reality.
What about the private bondholders who refuse to take the 74% haircut? Will they trigger the credit default swaps?
Well, I guess they're going to. And I don't see any solution to that, really. But I'm guessing that just given the way that government is at the moment and the power that it has, we're going to see a lot of blackmail and bullying going on to try and make those guys conform.
Mm-hmm. Nigel, why can't the boys in Brussels simply admit that their European Union scheme is a complete failure?
The last big idea that we had in this time zone was called communism. And it started, of course, properly in 1917. And decades in, even when it was obvious to everybody that it was failing, that it was imprisoning its own citizens, that it was removing democracy and wealth, still there were apologists for the big idea. And that was the big idea for the first half of the 20th century, and the big idea for the last half of the 20th century was European federalism. And it still represents the big idea. And when I challenge them here in the Parliament, and you can look at it, guys, on YouTube or whatever you like, I'm always met with this, well, of course, we're right. These are just a few teething problems, and it will all be sorted out. There are still too many people that believe in the big idea.
Nigel, do you know anything about the accusations made by Lord James of Blackheath about the massive money laundering operation involving $15 trillion of cash?
Yes, I have heard about that. And of course, a lot of this is backed up, of course, by the drugs trade and everything else and black money that is circulating around the global markets. I can't comment on the specifics of it, but I also can't say that I'm entirely surprised.
Okay. Hey, one last question. I know you are a leader of a European-wide alliance of people and organizations committed to freedom and liberty. Is there any discussion among people of perhaps creating a global alliance? I mean, we have the Tea Party movement here in America, and in other countries, people are rising up to oppose the tyranny of the bankers. Have you had any discussion with creating a worldwide movement in defense of liberty and freedom?
Yes, liberty, freedom, and democracy. There have been some preliminary discussions. I have to be honest and say it hasn't gone any further than that yet, but I would welcome such a global movement. We've got to fight back against these people who seem to want to entrap us in a form of global government where we lose all of the things that those that went before us were actually prepared to fight and die for. So I don't think we've got to that stage yet, but I mean, don't be surprised and watch this space.
All right. Nigel Farage, Great Britain, elected member of the European Parliament. Nigel, thank you so much.